Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 396, and today's date is June 20th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Central Bankers Are Making Plans to Airstrike Syria. Be prepared for a false flag event. Now, what have we been seeing for the last couple of days? Well, we've been seeing terrorism. We've been seeing they're going to attack the UK. They're going to attack the United States. When I say they, I'm talking about ISIL, ISIS, because this terrorist group is inside of Iraq, and it is trying to take over the country. Now, of course, this whole entire thing has completely got out of control. It is a blowback now, and things are completely deteriorating there. Many Sunnis are now joining this force, and we can see that as usual, the United States central bankers have lost control of the situation, just like in Ukraine when they had a coup d'etat to take over the government. They took over the government. They lost Crimea. They lost the southeast section. Now they're having a battle. Of course, they call them terrorists there too. And we see the same thing happening in Iraq. Completely lost control. Yes, they had a plan. Yes, they trained ISIL. Yes, they funded them. Yes, they're made up of many Americans and other people in the private Western Central Bank countries. They brought him in there. They thought they had a great plan, and it's completely backfiring on them. But they're going to use this to their advantage because they're going to use this to try to airstrike Syria. And we can see right now the Obama administration is actually making plans to do this. They're looking at the situation, and they will track down this group wherever they are. And of course, you know they're not going to really bomb them. They're going to go straight in and say, oh, look, it just so happened we hit some of Assad's troops, and it will make it easier for the rebels that are still fighting in Syria to move in. And this is exactly what they want to do. Now, before they do this, they need to get the American people, Congress, on board with this entire situation. And the thing is, how are they going to do this? Well, they're trying to scare us now with all this terrorism. They're saying that the ISIL Sunni group has captured a weapons of mass destruction chemical area, and they're trying to scare everyone, saying, yes, there's weapons of mass destruction again, and they're using this once again. They're using 9/11 everywhere possible to scare everyone. Of course, we have the government officials in the UK out there saying, listen, you need to be aware that this is going to hit England, and it's going to be absolutely terrible. You can't say this has nothing to do with us. It does have something to do with us. And really, it doesn't. It has to do with the central bankers, because what's happening there is different areas are breaking off. They're not going through Baghdad and to sell their oil. We see China has a huge amount of investment. Russia has a huge amount of investment there. They are selling arms to Maliki, and right now the United States government has been backing Maliki, even backed Maliki when Maliki came to them and said, listen, other regions are selling oil not going through Baghdad. And of course, Washington came out and said, we support Maliki. All regions need to sell their oil through Baghdad. And of course they do, because they has to be on the US dollar. They can't bypass it. Everyone needs to get the piece of the action. And then all of a sudden, what has happened? Everything has gotten out of control. They were afraid to send any type of representative there, but now I see John Kerry with this 300-man security guard force is heading towards Baghdad to see if they can calm the situation, which this is not going to do anything whatsoever. The situation is just going to get worse, and we see the ISIL Sunni people have now captured refineries. They're raising the flag up, and they're saying we are coming into Baghdad. And this is what they're doing right now. This entire situation is being used right now because they really want to get into Syria. They are doing everything they possibly can. And guess what? They'll just remove Maliki. They'll go into Syria. They don't care as long as the oil, the refineries, and all this is being sold using the dollar to keep it propped up. Anything else that goes on, they could care less. Let's get into the economic collapse news, and then as we get further into the report, we'll talk more about this. Now, what we're seeing right now is pretty much the economy is faltering. It is falling apart, and we all know this. But there's a lot of information coming out, and a lot of the corporate media are starting to say, you know something, there is a problem here in the United States and in Europe. Something just doesn't make sense. And like I said before, we have the government-controlled information where they can manipulate it, change it around, and then we have the real indicators of what people are doing, what corporations are doing, what the real estate market's doing, and that is becoming more and more separate and apart from the manipulated numbers. And what we're seeing right now is Quad Graphics. They're closing a plant in Illinois, 550 people losing their job. Morrison's, which is a supermarket chain, they pretty much are cutting about 2,600 jobs, and they're basing this on falling sales. Really, the job numbers are better, people have more work, and there's a problem. People don't want food. It makes no sense. Coach, they're closing 70 stores. Why? Because sales have dropped by 7% in the first quarter of this year, and they're saying it looks like it's going to get worse. Now, I see in the corporate media, I think this was out of Money, and what we're seeing right now is they are confirming the housing market is imploding. It is not going to recover. The 2-year-old U.S. housing recovery is faltering. It is not getting better. The big housing rally wiped itself out because prices increased too quickly for buyers to keep up, said Richard Hastings. The pool of eligible new buyers is collapsing because of stagnant incomes, lack of credit. Really, you think that's the only reason, but they are right. New buyers are collapsing because the youth of America, the foundation, cannot find work. They're living with their parents. They don't make enough to save up for the down payment. Even if the down payment is 3%, 5%, 0%, they just don't have that money to even pay for the mortgage. The rest of the older generation who've lost their jobs have never recovered in finding the same salary job again. It seems like they've been getting jobs that are reduced in salary, or they had to go part-time because they couldn't find full-time work. The 3 major housing forecasters, MBA and government-run mortgage financiers, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, began the year projecting an average home sale gain of 10% in 2014. Boy, were they wrong. Well, Freddie Mac this week lowered its home sales forecast by 1.8% to 5.4 million, which will be the first annual drop in 4 years. The company also cut its prediction on mortgage lending volume for purchasers 1% to 751 billion. Let me just say, these numbers are much, much lower. Of course, they're going to come back later on going, okay, the summer's over. It's actually a lot worse than we thought, and this is going to completely decline as time goes on. High-wage sectors haven't rebounded, according to the report. Compared with 2008, there were 1.6 million fewer people working in manufacturing in May and 340,000 fewer people working in finance, according to government data. The entire system is collapsing on itself. They are just recognizing it right now. We knew this going back months and months and months ago, that this was hyped up, was pumped up, and it was a bubble. And once this summer is over, this whole entire thing is going to become crashing down. It will not be able to recover whatsoever. And the countries around the world, they realize this. They realize Europe is in big trouble. We realize that the United States has created this illusion, and this illusion is completely falling apart now, and the central bankers understand this, and this is why we see these flashpoints in Ukraine, the flashpoint in the Middle East right now. They are trying to push the agenda of war. They need to cover this up. They understand the collapse is coming, and it's not going to be blamed on them. They will turn around and blame this on someone else. And this is starting to escalate. We can see that more and more retail shops are closing, laying off people. We see real estate completely falling apart. Unemployment is continually going up, even though they're telling us it's going down. GDP is a complete nightmare. They keep revising it down, down, down. They keep changing their forecasts because they don't know what else to do at this time because the numbers don't fit. And they need to continually push the war agenda to make everyone believe it was not their fault. And this is why they're saying the recovery's still there. It's just a little slow at this point. But we all know this is completely fake, phony, and false. Now, Russia, as we know, is creating a national payment card system. They created the chip technology for it. Russia has developed its own microchip for the national payment card, which hope will provide better information security. Russia is ready to replace the technology used in foreign payment systems, Visa and MasterCard, with a chip created for Sberbank's universal electronic card. The need to accelerate the development of Russia's own national payment system became evident after, of course, Visa and MasterCard said they were going to block payments, and also because of the sanctions what's going on in Ukraine. The national payment card system will be co-branded with Chinese UnionPay, Japanese JCB, and the international Visa and MasterCard payment system. So it'll be all interconnected. Now we see that more and more countries are starting to completely bypass the dollar. China would start direct trade between the renminbi and the British pound on Thursday. That means they will not deal with the dollar whatsoever. No conversion, a complete bypass. China's foreign exchange trade system confirmed sterling and yuan would be directly swapped without using the dollar as an intermediary. China has long had direct currency trade with the U.S. and has recently added Japan's yen, the Australian, New Zealand, and Canadian dollars, the Russian ruble, and the Malaysian ringgit to its options. So we see this is being pushed ahead because they realize the dollar is completely falling apart and collapsing at this time. The U.S. dollar domination makes world economy unstable. New reserve currencies are needed. And this is coming from Jacques Sapir, French economist and the director of the Higher School of Social Sciences in Paris. He is saying that Russia's and China's desire to get rid of the dollar in their gas transaction is quite likely to be fulfilled. He pointed out that many countries, especially the producers of raw materials, would like to end their dependency on dollar for international transactions. What does this mean? Everyone's realizing, and they're losing faith in the dollar. They're realizing, yeah, the dollar is dead. We need to make precautions. We need to take action to protect ourselves from when the dollar completely collapses. And this is why the central bankers are out there trying to gin up war everywhere. I mean, they are really pushing hard at this time. Now, in Bulgaria, what we're seeing is that the fourth largest Bulgarian bank seized after bank run. And what happened was, the bank's not bankrupt. It's just a little insolvent. We just don't have money here. And we see that people are running to the bank saying, you know what? We want our money. They woke up and they're like, wait a minute, we better get our money out of this bank. And of course, the central bankers are out there saying, whoa, 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 no, you don't have to worry. Everything is fine here. Let's not tear down the house here and take out all our money. But if that was me, I'd be running to the bank to get my money. And of course, all these people who kept their money in there, they really shouldn't. And I personally do not keep that much in the bank. I only keep enough for the bills. Everything else is laid out in other areas, in cash and in precious metals. I do not keep that much in the bank because I do not want to be caught in that situation like the people in Cyprus and now the people in Bulgaria. And we can see from what has been happening around the world and what has been going on, and from all the nations that created the bail-in documents, we know when they become desperate enough and everything starts falling apart, they are going to stop everyone from taking their money out of the bank. Actually, they're going to put capital controls in effect. You will not be able to access your money. And when you wake up that morning and you say, what's going on, it will be too late, because once you hear it on the news or anywhere else, it is way too late. You are done. Your money is stuck there. You can never get it out. And they will take it, and that's that. And that's what's going to happen when things really start to go south. Now, we understand the United States government and the central bankers, the elite, the globalists, whatever you like to call them, the 1%, they still, and they haven't stopped this, they still are trying to remove the rights of the people. They haven't stopped, and they're trying to disarm the American people because they really don't care about the people here. They believe they're just workers. They really shouldn't have rights. They hate the Constitution. It gets in their way pretty much everything, and they don't want the people to be armed because what's very fearful to them is an armed American person, because that enables them to fight back, and they don't like people that fight back. They like people that just do whatever they say, and they have no ability to fight back, and this scares them, especially when everything goes south. They want to make sure they have control over the people, and those people with weapons is going to be a little bit more difficult. And out of shtfplan.com, they put up an article saying that, yes, from everything that we see, there's no doubt about it, they want our weapons, and it has nothing to do with the people's safety or anything like that. And they gave 8 of the federal bans, and here are some of them. In 2013, Senator Dianne Feinstein proposed an assault weapon and large ammunition magazine ban that would have banned all detachable magazines, semi-automatic rifles, and shotguns. This year, Feinstein asked President Obama to order the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives to tighten restrictions on the importation of semi-automatic firearms and their parts. Legislation was introduced to impose universal background checks, which would have amounted to registering all firearm sales and pave the way for registering all firearms possessed. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has attempted to ban the importation of certain shotguns. The BATFE also considered whether to restrict solid hunting bullets as armor-piercing ammunition. The BATFE restricted 5.5 by 39 millimeter 7 and 6 as armor-piercing ammunition. This year, BATFE has proposed to excessively expand the categories of persons prohibited under federal law from acquiring or possessing firearms on mental health grounds. And mental health is very broad. They can put anything in there they want. If you're anti-government, you have a mental illness. You can't have a weapon. Last year, the Obama administration signed the UN Arms Treaty. It is not ratified by the Senate right now. It is sitting there, but guess what? As soon as they can get this passed, he will sign it. And we have to remember, many of the states have very draconian gun laws on their books, especially the ones that allow people to snitch on others if they believe that this person has a stolen weapon, or they believe a family member or somebody else who received a weapon that might not be legal. And of course, New York has this law, and they will give a reward of $500 if they can prove it. And of course, when you're telling on someone, you don't need any proof. They just want you to tell on people, and we see many other laws that a lot of the states have. Now, in New York, which is a very populated area, New York City, we see that the Attorney General now wants the kill switch on all phones, because this really reduces crime of people stealing phones. And this is ridiculous. They're saying this is for your benefit. Really what this kill switch is when things go south, they don't want people reporting on anything, and in areas they can just throw the switch, shut them off for a little while. You can't take pictures, you can't make calls, your phone becomes useless, it's just dead. Back when the Boston bombing was occurring, they tried to shut down the cell towers, which they did, so no one can transmit information, because the terrorists, we don't want them to communicate. Yeah, that's not why. What they did is they thought they stopped the people from taking pictures of the situation. But what happened was, when the cell towers were turned back on, everyone started transmitting all of these pictures, and they were all over the internet, that The bags where the explosives were look like they came from Blackwater. They have the same patches, the same color. They started pointing out all this evidence, and of course then we had that fertilizer explosion in Texas, which took all eyes off of that down to Texas for one day, where they were able to call in and ask all the people who took pictures to send them to the FBI so they could take a look at them. And this way they made up their story about the brothers having caused the entire problem. And of course we know this was a complete setup. We saw the pictures, they were photoshopped. The bag they were carrying was not black, it was white. All the things did not fit, and they went with that story, and we knew that was a complete false flag event at the time. Now, yesterday I talked about Uganda, and very interestingly, we knew that the Uganda authorities were making a deal with China, and China only. They're making a lot of deals, same with Nigeria, same with Sudan, and Uganda authorities said they infiltrated this terrorist group that was funded by the United States, and they said they were planning on doing something in Uganda, and of course this always coincided with some type of deal happening with China. Now, since that was completely uncovered, we see now that the United States now has placed sanctions on Uganda, and the sanctions are for the anti-gay laws, and they were building up on this over time, and all of a sudden they placed sanctions on Uganda, and that just coincides with pretty much everything that they've been doing, and we can see that they'll do anything they possibly can to stop what is going on, because they realize as more and more of this happens, they lose control and the dollar keeps sliding. And you have to remember, the central bankers, the globalist elite, they want to keep this situation going. They like receiving the piece of the action by everyone using the dollar. They make a lot of money through this, and they don't want this gone. They want this to continue. But if it can't continue, they are not going to let another country have the reserve currency. They rather start a war to pretty much cover it up, because they think in their minds once the war is over and they're hiding in their bunkers, and after everything is said and done, they're going to emerge and say, let's restart the system, and they will do the same thing over again. And Uganda's government Friday said U.S. sanctions slapped on the country for tough anti-gay laws would have little or no impact on us. It's kind of meaningless. Now, out in Ukraine, what we're seeing is that a checkpoint on the border of Russia and Ukraine was shelled by the Kiev authorities, by the paid mercenaries, the anti-terrorist forces, and Russia is looking to understand why they did this, and they're saying that the Russian checkpoint was severely damaged, especially its engineer constructions and communication lines. People were hurt, and why were they doing this? So the Kremlin has been bringing in more military, enhanced border security along the Ukraine-Russian border, not troops, but security, because you have to remember, all of a sudden they saw a Ukraine tank on their land. It went across the border, and the tank was there. We're seeing shelling being done on the border of Russia, and they're bringing in more security forces. Moscow is surprised by allegations of a buildup of Russian troops near Ukraine, saying it is only taking measures backed by European leaders to better protect its borders. We are surprised by statements of alleged deployment of Russian troops along the border with Ukraine. In this case, there is no military buildup. There are only measures to strengthen the border security of the Russian Federation. And I hate to say this, any country would do this. Can you imagine here in the United States, if we saw a tank come from Canada or Mexico into our lands, everyone would be like, oh my God, what's going on? And we would see an increased security on the borders. Actually, here in the United States, they probably have a troop buildup. Now, the Donetsk people are saying that the Ukraine anti-terrorist group used white phosphorus on them. And I know Israel does use white phosphorus. This is completely illegal. They're not allowed to use this. But the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic is planning to carry out tests to prove that the Ukrainian government forces use prohibited weapons. They have video evidence of phosphorus from bombs being used. And of course, they're Europe, America, they're just completely ignoring this evidence. Now they are taking soil samples to prove that the videos do fit, and they're trying to show that, yes, they are using these types of weapons. And of course they are. Remember what Yatsenyuk said. These people are meaningless. They have no right to be here, and they're going to remove the evil from the country. So they really don't care about the people whatsoever, and you can see by all the tactics they are using. Now, the Ukrainian president Poroshenko has ruled out any talks with the representatives of the self-proclaimed Donetsk region. He's saying there's no reason to have talks whatsoever, and he saying he has the whole entire plan for peace, and he's rolling out his peace plan. And he's calling for a 7-day ceasefire. Poroshenko has announced a unilateral ceasefire, one-sided, in eastern Ukraine, halting the so-called anti-terrorist operations. Anti-government activists must now lay down arms or be destroyed. So we will stop firing upon you for 7 days. You lay down your weapons and say you give up and join in with Ukraine, and you are not separate and apart from Ukraine anymore. That's the peace process. No talks. We don't want talks. Just do what we say. Now, of course, what we're seeing here is that this really isn't a peace plan. This is an ultimatum. And, of course, Russia is out there saying Ukraine ceasefire isn't an offer of peace. They're saying Ukraine ceasefire lacks key talks offer. There are no talks. And he's saying Poroshenko giving ultimatum to rebels to disarm. And you know what's going to happen once they throw down their arms. They're going to open fire on these people and kill every single one of them and take most of them to prison with the ones they do not kill. So this really isn't a peace type of talk. It's an ultimatum. And, of course, the southeastern region is not going to abide by this, and of course Ukraine is going to say, well, we tried peace, we can't have anything else, let's move in, and the war will continue. Now, Australian troops are headed towards Iraq to secure their embassy. We understand they evacuated the embassy, but now they're sending in troops. Australian Defense Minister says a small Australian Defense Force liaison element is already in Baghdad, but would not give how many are there at this time. So they have troops already in there. France has called for an immediate action against the so-called Islamic State of Iraq. They want a war. Let's move in and take care of business, and this is what they are planning. Now, what's very interesting is that a report came out that ISIL was killing hundreds of rebels every week and diverting them from operations against the regime of Assad. The sources said ISIL attacks were killing more rebels than Assad regime. They said the Islamist network responsible for killing thousands of rebels in 2014 refrained from conducting any major operations against Assad's military or militias. As a result, the Syrian military was said to have granted virtual immunity to ISIL. And you have to remember, most of the ISIL group is made up of Sunnis. I know there's reports out there saying, no, not really. But yeah, we're starting to see that most of them are Sunni. And we're seeing more and more of the Sunni tribes join in on this fight. Now, we understand that now the U.S. government is not supporting Maliki. They want him out, and they want to put another leader in right now because he's lost control of what is going on. Oil's being sold, not going through Baghdad. And what's very interesting is that Putin's is now supporting Maliki. Now, Russia has a lot of investments inside of Iraq. So does China. China is staying back right now, not saying much. Russia has been supplying Maliki with a lot of military weapons. And we see right now that Putin is taking the other side. He is now supporting Maliki, where the United States and the private Western Central Bank countries are saying, you know what, we want Maliki out. Now, they're also trying to link Libya right now with ISIL, because we understand in Libya the people there are rising up. They want their country back. They're making great gains. The the country is in complete chaos there also. Nothing is going well, and now they're making a link that, yes, it's also ISIL in there. Now, you have to remember, when the United States went into all these countries, they quickly turned around and said all these people who are attacking the government, the puppet regimes in all these countries, were Al-Qaeda. And using that term Al-Qaeda, they were able to use drones and attacks because of Congress saying, yes, you can use military action on the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. Now they're making links with ISIL to all of these. So it wasn't Al-Qaeda all this time, and of course they're saying it's a split off, but what we're seeing now is a real run-up to the power of the puppet regimes. They don't want the United States governments in there, they don't want the central banks in there, and they want their countries back. And we can see already in Libya, those people tried to sell oil already, and of course the United States went in, took that ship back, and said, no, you will not sell oil, not using the US dollar, we will stop you at every turn. Now, there was a press conference in the United Nations, and this happened yesterday. The Syrian mission to the United Nations convened a press conference featuring people from the U.S. who observed the recent elections in Syria. And we know how those elections went. We understand that there was a huge majority of Syrians coming out, voting for Assad, showing support. And what happened was, as soon as that part came on about how the elections went and how the people really supported Assad, it was completely blacked out. As soon, 5 minutes into the opening comments of Syrian Ambassador al-Jafari, the webcast was completely cut off. The thousands of journalists, political analysts, and others who view the UN webcast each day from all over the world were denied the ability to watch the press conference. And this happened many, many times before, and they didn't want anyone to hear what was going on during this UN press conference. And the people out there, and you can still see it because it's still recorded, it's out on the net. When this was going on, they just blacked it out because they didn't want to hear that this election went well. The people of Syria supported Assad. They went out, even though there was not many candidates out there. He was the leading candidate, but they wanted to show his support, and they completely blacked this out because they don't want people to know what's really going on. Now, Obama, just like the title of this report, the central bankers are looking and mulling over possible airstrikes in Syria on the terror camps of ISIS and ISIL, and this is coming from the Obama administration. The president has made clear time and again that he will take action as necessary, including direct U.S. military action if it's necessary to defend the United States against an imminent threat. We will go anywhere. There are no boundaries for the United States. If we need to go into Syria to track down the ISIS and the ISIL groups, we will go into Syria. Once we get the intel from the region inside of Iraq, seeing where we need to go in and use our kinetic strikes, we will make that determination. So you can see they're already planning and using this to move into Syria, and you know what's going to happen after this. First of all, they just can't go in there and say, all right, we're going after these people. This is why they haven't done anything yet. Congress right now has a very low approval rating from the American people. I think it's like 7%. Congress is not going to say, let's go to war. The American people do not want war. The president, of course, is out there saying, listen, I can do whatever the hell I want. I got a pen and I got a paper. But guess what? Because of the Constitution, he can't do whatever he wants. The only time he can, and he can use the War Powers Act, if something happens to the United States, like an attack. Now, let's keep that in mind, that the only way for him to do this at this point, because this seems like we're going back to August of 2013 during the false flag event with Syria. He could not rile up the American people to go to war. Congress was like, you know what, we're not voting for this. They needed a way out, and this is why Kerry went out there and said, you know what, we just want Assad to give up his chemical weapons. We'd be fine with that. And they started out with the dialogue. Right now, the chemical weapons, 7 to 8%, are kept inside the country. They don't want those weapons out of the country because they want to make that treaty null and void, which would give them another opportunity to move into Syria. So they're building this up, and the only way right now, unless all of a sudden the Iraqi military fights off ISIL and ISIS, brings back and brings order back to the country of Iraq, and everything is fine, and we just end up collapsing because the dollar is being dumped pretty much everywhere. I don't think this is a real possibility. I think what's going to happen is that they need some type of an event to hit the United States to make it look like, it doesn't really matter if it's the ISIS or ISIL, the Sunni group, saying that they attacked the United States, if it's Syria using it and attacking the United States, if Iraq, it doesn't really matter if it's Russia, it really doesn't matter at this point. They just need some type of an event to bring us to the situation inside of Iraq and then get into Syria. And the only way to do this at this point is really to have an event here in the United States, because they need to move the people to say, look what happened. They really did it. They shocked and they attacked the United States just like they said they were going to do. And this is going to have to be much, much larger than 9/11, because they're going to have to really show why we need to go back into this region. Now, what is interesting here is that there were 3 Ukrainian men arrested in Brewster County. They came over the border, and they came from Mexico into Texas. And it's very strange to see Ukrainians crossing the border from Mexico into Texas. They weren't poor, they were very built, and it looks like they were, guys that trained, and they're trying to figure out why these 3 Ukraine men crossed the border into Texas, and I think they are questioning them right now. Now, Ryan Crocker is out there. This is Ryan Crocker, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq during the surge years, says the terror group that has captured large swaths of Iraqi territory is a threat to the United States and is more formidable than Al-Qaeda, and which we know. We know that they continually are using this propaganda to build up that this group is terrible, they're scary, and we should be afraid that they're going to cause another 9/11 inside the United States, and they're continually doing this over and over. Now, yesterday I reported that the Sunni extremists in Iraq, ISIL, ISIS group, have occupied Saddam Hussein's premier chemical weapons production facility. Now, this is complete propaganda that they're using at this time, because there are reports going all the way back to 2004, 2005, 2006. Iraq had no stockpiles of biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons, and this is coming from the weapons chief, U.S. weapons inspector, and this is coming from an official report. The ICG has not found evidence that Saddam possessed any type of weapons of mass destruction whatsoever. And the corporate media, the U.S. government, they're out there feeding us this propaganda that they found chemical weapons, they don't know if they can use them, and there's another report coming out now saying that ISIS now may have access not only to secret sarin poison gas production facilities in northeast Iraq, but also access to a man who knows how to use them. I mean, they are really pushing this propaganda. They're trying to convince us that they're going to use this here in the United States, because they really need to gin up some type of false flag event, and we could see one coming very, very soon. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.